The Black Acts were passed to deal with people who would paint their faces black so they could disguise themselves and commit crimes at night. Okay? And if you got caught painting your face black, right, you could get sentenced to death. Now, let's ask ourselves real quick. Who in Europe could have been painting their faces black in order to blend in with the night so they could disguise themselves so they could commit crimes? Could it have been the ancestors of the people who look like me? Or could it have been the ancestors of the people who are in charge today that claim they brought us here from Africa? Who could it be? Okay, let's just think about that for 2 seconds and use a little bit of common sense. Okay. Who would need to paint their faces black to blend in with the night to disguise themselves while they're committing crimes? Okay. Who still today, to this very day, has festivals like Mardi Gras, right, and a ton of other festivals throughout the world where they still paint their faces black today, right? Here's just a couple examples so you can see where I'm really coming from, what I'm talking about, right? Okay. Now, when have we ever heard of anyone who looks like me painting their faces black? Oh, we haven't. We haven't. Never. Okay. But how many examples do we have of the people who are in charge today, as well as their ancestors, right? Going back to the 1830s, to the point where they have a whole Wikipedia page about them doing this and a vague explanation as to why. Okay. How many? Who does this? We know exactly who does this. Okay? We know exactly who paints their faces black. And we know exactly, when we know that, we know who the black laws, the Black Acts of 1723 apply to. Okay? Right? But death wasn't the only punishment, see? Because if you painted your face black back in 1723, you got the death penalty. That's how serious they took it. Right? It wasn't funny. It wasn't for nobody's entertainment back then, was it? Right? And we're going to find out why that's important very shortly. Okay? Right? But what was the other punishments for it? The first offense was you got a fine. Right? The second was penal transportation. But what is penal transportation? See? So we got to find that out. Okay? So we're going to look up penal transportation real quick and see exactly what that is and what that means, right? Because that's a punishment for a crime, we know that. But what does it really mean? Penal transportation. Penal transportation was the relocation of convicted criminals or other persons regarded as undesirable to a distant place, often a colony, right? Now, we'll just stop for a quick second. It's the relocation of convicted criminals, and where do convicted criminals go? To prison, right? But here they're saying they're going to a distant place, right? We send them to a distant place because prisons are in the middle of nowhere, right? So they're sending them to a distant place too. But they don't call it a prison. They call it a colony, right? They call it a colony, okay? And they send them there, let's see, for how long? For a specified term, right? Just like prisoners. They get sent to prison for a specified term, right? Because we're talking about convicted criminals who've already gone to court and got their sentence, okay? Later, specifically established penal colonies, right? And penal means penalty, punishment, okay? Penal colonies became their destination. So a penal colony is a prison, okay? Now, while the prisoners may have been released once their sentences were served, well, that's what happens when their sentences are served, right? Today, right? They get 10 years, they do their 10 years, then they get released, right? They generally did not have the resources to return home. Of course they didn't. Why? Because when prisoners get out of prison, they're broke, right? Okay. So, banishment or forced exile from a polity or society has been used as a punishment since at least the 5th century in ancient Greece. Okay. The practice of penal transportation reached its height in the British Empire during the 18th and 19th centuries. Now, why is it important that we know this about England? What does this have to do with America? Well, we're about to find out, okay? Penal, oh, let me read this first though. Transportation removed the offender from society, mostly permanently, but was seen as more merciful than capital punishment. So instead of giving you the death sentence, right, for painting your face black, right, they gave you penal transportation, right? So they sent you to a colony far away, which we're going to find out where that colony is in just a second. The method was used for criminals, debtors, military prisoners, and political prisoners. So that's who got penal transportation. Okay. Penal transportation was also used as a method of colonization. Right? Now, that's not what we think of when we think of colonization, because I hear people throw that word around all the time, but they never use it correctly. They never use it correctly. This is just where the white man comes in and takes over. Okay. Well, let's start using that word correctly. Let's start using colony correctly, because a colony is a prison. Okay, that's where they send the convicted criminals. You send the convicted criminals to prison, and we know how words change over the years. Okay, we know how words change over the years. So back at this time, right, they used to call prison a colony. Okay, right. So it was a method of colonization, right? So colonization is what to do with the prisoners and what we do with the prisoners, okay? So, for example, from the earliest days of English colonial schemes or prison schemes, new settlements beyond the seas were seen as a way to alleviate domestic social problems of criminals and the poor. These are the undesirables that they're talking about, homeless people, as well as to increase the colonial labor force. Okay, so the prison workforce for the overall benefit of the realm. Okay, so that's penal transportation. Okay, now we need to read the Piracy Act so we can find out a little more detail about penal transportation. Okay, and where they were actually sending, where these colonies were. These penal colonies. So we're going to read the Piracy Act of 1717, right? Because even though that name sounds like it has nothing to do with what we're talking about, we're going to quickly find out that it does. Okay? So the Piracy Act 1717, sometimes called the Transportation Act. Okay? Penal transportation, right? See, they don't want to call it what it is, right? It's called the Transportation Act, right, of 1717. Was an act of the Parliament of Great Britain that established a regulated bonded system, right? What happens when you go to jail? You have to get bonded out, right? So a bonded system to transport criminals to where? To colonies in North America, like the 13 colonies, right? Because we hear about the 13 colonies. No, that's not what the 13 colonies were. They weren't running around playing flutes. Okay? That was going to prison. That's where they was going to. The colony is a prison. Okay? And what does it say? It says transporting criminals to colonies in North America, which is prisons in North America, for what? Indentured service as a punishment for those convicted. Okay, so indentured service is the punishment for those convicted or attainted, okay, which is a conviction, okay, in Great Britain, excluding Scotland. The act established a 7-year transportation sentence, okay, when you get sentenced for a crime, right? This was your sentence for the crime you committed, right? That's why they're transporting criminals and convicts. Okay, where? To the 13 colonies in America. Okay. As a punishment for people convicted of lesser felonies, those under benefit of the clergy, and a 14-year sentence for those more serious crimes in lieu of capital punishment. So instead of the death sentence. Okay. Completion of the sentence had the effect of a pardon. The punishment for returning before completion was death. Okay. That's where they were sending them. They were sending them to the 13 colonies. And what are the we hear 13 colonies and we think, oh, well, those are the settlers who were adventurers and coming to America for a better life. Well, maybe they were coming to America for a better life after they got out of prison, right? After they got out of prison, because they came here, right? If you came here to a colony, you came here as a prisoner, because colonies are prison. They're prisons, okay? All right, so let's get that correct first, okay? So penal transportation is colonization, okay? Okay, this is the method of what we do and how we transport prisoners, right? Who were painting their faces black, who we didn't kill, but if they do it again, you get the death sentence, okay? Right? They were sending those prisoners to America as punishment for their crimes, okay? Okay? The painting of one's face black, see, that didn't come from making fun of us, okay? That didn't come from making fun of us. That came from you got caught committing a crime that you will get the death sentence for. You can get the death sentence for, but we had mercy on you and we sent you to America, to one of the 13 colonies. Okay. And what happened to the people who got sent to America as prisoners to the penal colonies, which were settlements? Okay. What happened to them? See, a colony is also called a settlement. That's where they get this term settler from. Oh, well, my ancestors were settlers. Okay, why? Because they lived in a colony, right? And the settlements were colonies. Okay. So they were prisoners, right? What happened to these prisoners who prefer to call themselves settlers?